You're sitting there watching your rent go up another $300 this year, scrolling through Zillow listings that have doubled in price since the pandemic, and you think to yourself, if only interest rates would just come down, I could finally afford a house. Here's the brutal truth. You're focusing on the wrong villain entirely. The interest rate distraction. I'm Tom, and this is Tom Thinks. I'm here to cut through the Wall Street jargon and give you the real talk on your money, even if it hurts your feelings a little bit. If you're someone who feels completely priced out of the housing market, watching prices climb while your savings can't keep up, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Now look, I get it. When mortgage rates went from 3% to 7%, everyone started pointing fingers. The headlines screamed about how the Federal Reserve was killing the American dream. But here's what most people don't realize. Interest rates are just the shiny object we're all chasing while the real problem is happening right under our noses. Let me give you some perspective. Back in 2021, when rates were at historic lows, houses were already selling for tens of thousands over asking price. People were waiving inspections, paying cash, and getting into bidding wars that made no mathematical sense. The median home price in places like Chesterfield County, Virginia was rising by almost 14% annually. That's 3 to 4 times higher than a normal year. And this was happening with interest rates at 3%. Here's the thing, when Harvard economist Gregory Mankiw was interviewed back in 2022, he pointed out something crucial. The housing market was already booming before the Fed started raising rates. In fact, he said the Fed should have looked at the housing market and realized they were putting too much stimulus in the system. They should have started tapering earlier, but they didn't. So what does this tell us? The housing affordability crisis wasn't created by interest rates going up. It was created by a perfect storm of factors that had been brewing for years, and the low interest rates just poured gasoline on an already raging fire. The real question isn't, when will rates come down? The real question is, what structural changes have made housing permanently unaffordable for an entire generation? Think about this. If interest rates magically drop back to 3% tomorrow, do you really think housing would become affordable again? Or would prices just shoot up another 20% as all that pent-up demand floods back into the market? The answer is obvious to anyone who's been paying attention. We're not dealing with a temporary problem that will fix itself when rates normalize. We're dealing with a fundamental restructuring of who gets to own property in America. The supply crisis. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Everyone talks about supply and demand, but most people don't understand just how broken the supply side of housing has become. It's not just that we're not building enough homes, it's that we've made it illegal to build enough homes in the places where people actually want to live. Let me break this down for you. For the last 60 years, homeowners and landlords have been voting for increasingly strict zoning codes. This is what people call NIMBYism, not in my backyard. When someone tries to build a large apartment building or even just denser housing in an existing neighborhood, the people who already own homes show up to city council meetings and shut it down. They don't want the traffic, they don't want their views blocked, and most importantly, they don't want more housing supply that might lower their property values. Here's a statistic that should make your blood boil. In Maricopa County, Arizona, which includes Phoenix, they're seeing a net inflow of about 150 new people every single day. That's 150 people who need a place to live. But the construction industry can't keep up. As one real estate assessor put it, new construction starts are up, but people can't build them fast enough to meet demand. Now, you might be thinking, Tom, why don't we just build more? Well, it's not that simple. Construction costs have skyrocketed. Lumber prices went through the roof during the pandemic. Labor costs have increased. Supply chain disruptions made everything more expensive. But even if we could magically make building materials cheap again, we'd still run into the zoning wall. Look at what's happening across the country. In Chesterfield County, Virginia, they saw real estate assessments increase by an average of 12% countywide in just 1 year. That's not because of interest rates. That's because, as the director of real estate assessment said, if you have 100 buyers fighting for one property, guess what? Price is going to go up. This is Economics 101, but with a twist. Normally, when prices go up, suppliers rush in to make more of the product. But housing isn't like manufacturing iPhones. You can't just build a factory and start pumping out homes. You need land, you need permits, you need to navigate local politics, and you need to do all of this while existing homeowners are actively working against you to protect their own financial interests. The result? We have a housing market where supply is artificially constrained by decades of policy decisions, and demand keeps growing because people still need places to live. This isn't a bubble that's going to pop. This is a structural problem that's been building for generations. The demand explosion. Okay, so we've got constrained supply. That's bad enough. But what's happening on the demand side is even more fascinating and more damaging to your chances of ever owning a home. Here's the secret that no one in real estate wants to talk about. Housing has stopped being just a place to live. It has become a financial asset class. And when something becomes an investment vehicle, it follows completely different rules than when it's just shelter. Think about this. Back in 2012, during the foreclosure crisis, Maricopa County was seeing 40 to 50 homes go up for auction every single day. Today, according to Rob Binkley, who runs one of the largest foreclosure acquisition companies in Arizona, they're seeing maybe 2 to 5 homes a day. That's not because people are doing better financially, it's because the lending standards have changed. After the 2008 crash, they got rid of all the subprime loans, the stated income loans, the unverified loans. Now, to get a mortgage, you need a lot of money down, good credit, and verified income. And here's the kicker. The majority of existing mortgages are locked in at 3 to 4% interest rates on 30-year fixed loans. Now, here's what most people don't realize about this. When you have a 3% mortgage on a house that's doubled in value, you're not going to sell. Even if you want to move, even if you get a new job in another city, you're not going to give up that 3% mortgage to take out a new loan at 7%. This creates what economists call lock-in. People are literally locked into their current homes because moving would be financial suicide. It gets worse. Because housing has become an investment, wealthy individuals and corporations are buying up properties as assets. They're not buying them to live in. They're buying them to rent out or flip. And when you have wealthy buyers treating houses like stocks or bonds, they're competing with regular families who just want a place to raise their kids. Remember what that Reddit user said? The people that already have houses are still buying houses. Rias, the first-time home buyers are falling off the market. This is creating a permanent class divide. If you already own property, you're benefiting from this system. Your home value goes up. You can borrow against it. You can trade up. But if you're trying to get into the market for the first time, you're competing against people who are using housing as part of their investment portfolio. And here's the psychological trap. When everyone around you is making money from their homes, you feel like you're falling behind. You feel the pressure to buy at any price, even if it means stretching your budget to the breaking point. This fear of missing out drives people to make terrible financial decisions, like waiving inspections or offering $50,000 over asking price. The demand isn't just coming from people who need shelter. It's coming from investors, from second home buyers, from people treating real estate like a casino. And as long as housing keeps appreciating, this demand isn't going away. The lock-in effect. Now, let's talk about the most powerful force keeping housing prices high. The lock-in effect. This is where the math gets really interesting and where you start to understand why this market isn't going to crash like 2008. Look, when you have a 3% 30-year fixed mortgage on a $400,000 house, your monthly principal and interest payment is about $1,700. If you were to sell that house and buy a new $500,000 house at 7% interest, your payment jumps to over $3,300. That's nearly double the payment for only 25% more house. Who in their right mind would make that trade? Nobody. And that's exactly what's happening across the country. People are staying put. They're renovating instead of moving. They're adding home offices instead of trading up. They're doing anything and everything to avoid giving up that golden handcuff of a low-interest mortgage. Here's what this means for you. The potential buyer, the inventory of homes for sale is permanently depressed. Normally, in a healthy market, about 6% of homes turn over every year. Today, we're lucky if we see 3%. And it's not because people don't want to move. It's because they can't afford to move. Rob Binkley, the foreclosure expert I mentioned earlier, put it perfectly. Nobody is walking away from those loans. He's talking about the 3 to 4% mortgages. Even if someone loses their job, even if they're struggling financially, they're going to do everything possible to keep that house because they know they'll never get that mortgage rate again. This creates a bizarre situation where even if we have a recession, and Harvard's Gregory Mankiw thinks we're likely to have at least a mild recession, the housing market might not crash. In fact, Mankiw pointed out that the market has already priced in a mild recession. What it hasn't priced in is a deep recession like 1982. But here's the thing, even in a deep recession, who's going to default on their mortgage? Not the people with 3% fixed rates and 20% equity. They'll cut back on everything else before they lose their house. They'll stop eating out. They'll cancel streaming services. They'll drive their cars into the ground. but they won't default on their mortgage because that mortgage is the best financial deal they'll ever get in their lifetime. This lock-in effect is creating a two-tier society. Tier 1, people who bought before 2022 with low rates and built up equity. They're financially secure, they have options. Tier 2, everyone else. You're competing for the tiny sliver of housing that actually comes on the market, and you're doing it with much higher borrowing costs. The system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed for the people who got in early. For everyone else, you just collateral damage. The wealth transfer. Alright, let's get uncomfortable for a minute. Let's talk about what's really happening here. The greatest intergenerational wealth transfer in modern history, and it's happening right under our noses. When housing prices double in 3 years, like that Reddit user mentioned, going from 250,000 to 500,000, what's really happening? It's not that houses suddenly became twice as valuable, it's that the dollar became less valuable. As that same Reddit user pointed out, the value of homes has largely gone up due to the value of the dollar decreasing. Now, here's where it gets really unfair. If you already own a home, this inflation works in your favor. Your mortgage payment stays the same if you have a fixed rate, but your home value goes up. Your equity increases. You feel richer. You can borrow against that equity. You can trade up to a bigger house. But if you're renting, you're getting crushed. Your rent goes up with inflation. Your savings lose purchasing power, and the down payment you've been saving for, it keeps getting further out of reach because home prices are rising faster than you can save. This is what economists call asset price inflation. It's different from regular consumer price inflation. When the price of milk goes up, everyone pays more. When the price of houses goes up, only the people trying to buy houses pay more. People who already own houses actually benefit. Think about the stimulus packages during the pandemic. Gregory Mankiw talked about this in his interview. The Fed kept interest rates very low, and rescue plans were financed by, in his words, printing money and handing it to people. People stuck that money in their checking accounts, and eventually they spent it. A lot of that spending went into housing. But here's the dirty secret: not everyone got that stimulus equally. If you own stocks or real estate, you got massive stimulus through asset price inflation. If you were living paycheck to paycheck, you got a few $1,000s that probably went to catching up on bills. This has created what I call the homeowner aristocracy. Once you're in the club, the system works for you. Your property taxes might go up like in Chesterfield County, where assessments rose 12%, but even there, they lowered the tax rate to offset some of the increase. The system protects homeowners. But if you're not in the club, you're funding that system through your rent. You're paying property taxes indirectly through your landlord. You're paying for schools, police, fire departments, all the services that make communities desirable, but you don't get any of the equity appreciation. This isn't just about housing affordability anymore. This is about what kind of society we want to live in. Do we want a society where home ownership is the primary path to wealth building, but that path is increasingly closed off to younger generations? Or do we need to fundamentally rethink how we provide shelter and build wealth in this country? The math doesn't lie. If you bought a house 3 years ago, you've likely seen your net worth increase by hundreds of thousands of dollars through no effort of your own. If you didn't buy 3 years ago, you're now looking at paying twice as much for the same house. That's not a market correction. That's a wealth transfer. The escape plan. Generest. So here we are. You're priced out of the housing market. Interest rates are high. Prices are high. Inventory is low. And everyone who bought before you is sitting pretty on their 3% mortgages. What do you do now? Do you give up on the dream of homeownership entirely? Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The traditional path to homeownership, save 20% down, buy a starter home, trade up every 5 to 7 years, that path is broken. It worked for your parents. It might have worked for your older siblings, but it doesn't work for you, not in this market. But here's the good news. When one door closes, another opens. You just have to be willing to walk through it, even if it's not the door you expected. First, let's talk about what not to do. Don't stretch your budget to the breaking point just to get into the market. Don't waive inspections. Don't offer $50,000 over asking price with no appraisal contingency. These are the kinds of desperate moves that lead to financial ruin when the market turns. And make no mistake, markets always turn eventually. Instead, here's what you should be doing. Number 1, stop thinking of your primary residence as an investment. This is the most important mental shift you can make. Your home is shelter first, investment second, or third, or fourth. When you stop thinking of it as a get-rich-quick scheme, you make better decisions. Number 2. Consider alternative paths to building equity. What if instead of saving for a down payment on a $500,000 house, you saved for a down payment on a $200,000 duplex? You live in one unit, rent out the other. The rental income helps pay your mortgage. You're building equity, and you're not competing with the wealthy investors, you're becoming one. Number 3. Think geographically. The pandemic proved that many jobs can be done remotely. The Chesterfield County article mentioned this because of the COVID-related paradigm shift toward teleworking. More people now have the freedom to relocate to lower-cost areas. Maybe you can't afford a house where you currently live, but can you afford a house somewhere else? Somewhere with lower prices where your income goes further? Number 4. Focus on what you can control. You can't control interest rates. You can't control zoning laws. You can't control investor demand. But you can control your savings rate. You can control your career trajectory. You can control your spending habits. Every dollar you save today is a dollar that can work for you tomorrow. Finally, remember this: housing markets move in cycles. We've never seen a cycle exactly like this one, but we've seen similar patterns. Gregory Mankiw compared it to the 1970s with too much stimulus on the demand side and adverse supply shocks. Eventually, supply and demand find a new equilibrium. Your job isn't to time the market perfectly. Your job is to position yourself so that when opportunities arise, you're ready. That means having cash saved. That means having good credit. That means understanding the market better than the other buyers. The American dream of homeownership isn't dead. It's just changed. And the people who succeed in this new reality won't be the ones following their parents' playbook. They'll be the ones who understand the new rules of the game and play it better than everyone else. So take a deep breath. The housing market feels insane right now because it is insane. But insanity doesn't last forever. Your job is to stay rational when everyone else is losing their minds. Save your money. Educate yourself. And when the right opportunity comes along, whether that's a house, a duplex, or a completely different investment, you'll be ready. Because in the end, it's not about owning a house, it's about owning your future. And that's something no market can ever take away from you.
Found this interesting? Subscribe to the channel. Give this video a like, share it out, and drop your questions or ideas in the comments. Until our next adventure.